On March 23, 2021, at exactly 11:47 p.m., a 911 call was logged into the Metro Police Department's system. It came from a number assigned to Detective Marcus Chen, a senior officer with 15 years of service. His voice was shaky, urgent, barely recognizable. "This is Detective Chen, badge 4771. I need backup at..." The line went dead. No address. No follow-up call. 12 seconds. That was all the department had. By the time officers triangulated the signal and arrived at the location, an abandoned third-floor apartment on South Fairview, Detective Marcus Chen was already dead. Found alone, slumped against a cracked wall, blood pooling beneath his back, service weapon still in its holster, not a single round fired. No signs of forced entry, no visible struggle, nothing taken. At first it looked like a cold professional execution, but as investigators dug deeper, the mystery thickened. Marcus hadn't simply died, he'd been silenced. To the outside world, Marcus Chen was a textbook example of honor. Commended 6 times, led 3 high-profile busts, taught community safety classes on weekends, the kind of man parents pointed to when they told their children what a real hero looked like. He lived in a quiet suburb with his wife and 2 daughters. He played chess with his neighbors, mowed his own lawn, brought donuts to the precinct every Friday. Nothing about him screamed trouble. If anything, he was uncomfortably perfect. But sometimes perfection is the best disguise. Detective Leah Monroe, the lead investigator assigned to the case, remembers the moment her team cracked open Chen's encrypted laptop. "It wasn't what we expected," she said in an interview. "There weren't emails, there weren't any letters, just a folder, hidden deep, labeled ECO. Inside were names, dozens of them. Some we recognized, some we didn't. And then there were dates. Dates that matched with unsolved cases, murders, disappearances. Next to each name was a number, some small, others reaching 6 figures. It looked like gambling slips at first, until they matched several entries with transaction logs across offshore accounts. Marcus Chen had been making payments, or receiving them. The amounts were inconsistent, the patterns subtle, but one thing was certain: this wasn't the behavior of a clean cop. What began as a homicide investigation quickly turned into something more disturbing: a map of criminal ties, webs leading into the heart of the city's underworld. The file suggested Chen had connections with people he'd supposedly put behind bars. The theory? He never stopped working for them. His gambling addiction started small: a poker night with old friends, then a debt, then another. Soon, he was in over his head. But rather than ask for help, he started to leverage what he had: information, raid plans, surveillance schedules, safe house locations. He traded it all, quietly, carefully, always just enough to stay valuable. Somehow he stayed hidden for years. His coworkers had no clue, his family didn't see the signs, but his bank statements, when traced, told a different story. A second mortgage no one knew about, credit card bills paid from untraceable sources, and overseas trips booked under false names, always returning with nothing to declare. The trigger that brought everything crashing down? No one knows for sure. Some believe he tried to walk away, that he wanted out. Others think he was preparing to turn himself in, maybe even become a whistleblower. But if that was true, someone got to him first. The apartment where he died, he'd rented it under an alias just 2 days before. There was no furniture, no personal belongings, just a single envelope marked, "In case I don't make it." That envelope never made it to evidence. By the time backup arrived, it was gone. Just like the security footage from the hallway. 5 cameras installed on the floor, all disabled at 11:41 p.m., 6 minutes before the call. Whoever did this was watching, calculated, efficient. They knew where he'd be, they knew the response time, and they knew exactly what to remove. The case stunned the department. Officers who'd served beside him refused to believe it. His wife called it a lie, saying Marcus had never placed a single bet in his life. But the evidence kept mounting. There were voicemail messages, deleted then recovered, from an unidentified male voice demanding repayment. Threats disguised in calm tones. One of them simply said, "You knew the rules, Marcus. Everyone pays in the end." The department kept the details quiet. Officially, his death remained under active investigation. Unofficially, no one wanted to admit what it meant. that a senior officer had become part of the very system he was sworn to fight. Detective Monroe later confessed, "We didn't lose just a colleague, we lost faith. Because if someone like Chen could fall, what about the rest of us?" Marcus Chen wasn't just killed, he was erased, scrubbed from both sides, law enforcement and organized crime. Caught in a storm he thought he could navigate, only to be pulled under. To this day, no suspect has been named, no arrests made. The department won't confirm whether a larger probe is ongoing, but the files from his hard drive, those that survived, suggest this wasn't an isolated case. Some names have already turned up dead, others vanished entirely. Like Marcus, they walked a fine line until it collapsed. This is not the story of a corrupt cop. It's the story of a man who gambled with darkness and lost, a man whose secrets destroyed him, a man whose silence was bought, then buried. Tonight we explore what really happened that night. We trace the hidden life of a man who lived in two worlds, and we ask the question that still haunts this city: was Marcus Chen killed by those he betrayed or by those he protected? This is the story of betrayal, obsession, and the quiet power of secrets. This is the story of the perfect cop's fatal secret. To understand how far Marcus Chen fell, you first have to understand how high he climbed. 15 years on the force, a senior detective in the Major Crimes Unit, a name spoken with admiration both in the department and the wider community. He was the kind of cop who ended up on the evening news for the right reasons, the one who showed up to charity events, who gave speeches at school assemblies, who coached Little League and organized holiday food drives. To the people around him, Marcus Chen was untouchable, the shining example of what law enforcement should look like. His colleagues nicknamed him the Golden Boy. They said he was the kind of man you'd want your daughter to marry, the kind of guy who stayed behind after shift to help rookies with their reports. He never missed a school play. He was the guy who remembered everyone's birthday, the guy who smiled in photos and made the badge look noble. His partner, Detective Luis Rivera, had worked alongside him for 8 years. They weren't just co-workers, they were brothers. Rivera would later say he thought he knew Marcus better than anyone, which only made the truth harder to accept. At home, Marcus seemed to have it all. A warm, stable marriage to Elena, his high school sweetheart. 2 beautiful kids, Emma, 12, and Jake, 9. A modest house in a quiet neighborhood, family vacations to the lake, weekend barbecues in the backyard. Elena described their life as happy, maybe not perfect, but good, reliable, safe. Looking back, she would admit there were signs, subtle ones. Marcus would zone out during conversations or come home late with vague explanations. He started checking his phone more, always saying it was work. But when you love someone, you don't dig too deep. You give them the benefit of the doubt. You trust. In one school assembly, Marcus stood in front of a gym full of children and said something that would echo later in chilling irony. Drugs don't just ruin lives, they destroy families. They turn good people into liars, thieves, even murderers. That's why we fight to keep them off the streets. Those words would haunt everyone who heard them. Because in 2019, Marcus Chen was still the hero of his own story. That year, at his daughter Emma's birthday party, Elena noticed him on edge. He kept checking his phone. When she asked about it, he smiled and said it was just work. She didn't question it further. Why would she? He was a detective. Calls at odd hours were normal. But she remembered the moment his phone buzzed. She saw the flicker in his expression, the way his smile faltered when he thought no one was watching, the way his eyes drifted somewhere else. That moment would stay frozen in her mind forever. A snapshot of the instant everything began to crack. What no one knew then was that Marcus had been carrying a secret, a dangerous one, and it all began with a simple game of cards. No one knows exactly when it started. Some say it was just for fun, a way to blow off steam after a long shift. A poker game in the back room of a friend's bar. Nothing serious, but the stakes rose. The wrong people joined. Soon, Marcus found himself in deeper than he could handle. A few $1,000s lost turned into 10, then 20, then more. He didn't tell Elena. He didn't tell Rivera. Instead, he borrowed, he made promises, and when the money ran out, he offered something else, something only a man with access to evidence rooms and case files could give. That's when the line blurred, and Marcus, the man who once stood in front of children and spoke of justice, crossed over into the very world he swore to fight. People started whispering, a few items missing from lockup, a drug bust that didn't quite match the paperwork, Anonymous tips that led nowhere. His name was never directly involved, but the shadow around it grew. At home, Elena found a second phone hidden in his nightstand. It was cheap, unregistered, a burner phone. The messages were deleted, the call history wiped. She confronted him. He told her it was for undercover work. She wanted to believe him. But something in her gut turned. His partner, Rivera, noticed changes too. Marcus was quieter, more withdrawn, short-tempered. One day he said something strange. "Luck's just another form of justice." Rivera didn't understand what he meant. He didn't ask. Behind the badge, Marcus Chen was unraveling. And the debts? They weren't just financial anymore. They came with strings. People started calling in favors, small ones at first. Let something slide here. Look the other way there. Then it got darker. By the time Rivera began asking real questions, it was too late. Because what started as a simple game of cards had opened a door. One that couldn't be closed. And once you step through a door like that, you don't walk back. The Golden Boy had made a deal. And the perfect life, it was about to shatter. Every Friday night, a group of Metro PD officers gathered in Detective Martinez's basement for poker. It was a ritual, $20 buy-ins, cold beer, and war stories exchanged with easy laughter. It was harmless fun among brothers in blue, a chance to leave the harsh realities of police work behind for a few hours. The basement was dimly lit, filled with cigarette smoke and the familiar sound of cards shuffling and chips clicking on the table. It was their escape. Marcus Chen loved those games. Martinez later recalled that Marcus said they helped him unwind after dealing with the worst humanity had to offer. The horrors they faced on the job left scars no one could see. But in that basement, surrounded by his fellow officers, Marcus could breathe. They all felt the same way. The poker nights were a refuge, a place where they could be just men, not detectives. But for Marcus, the relief those nights brought slowly faded. The modest $20 buy-ins became $50 stakes, and 50 became 100. The friendly games grew more intense. The rush that poker gave Marcus was no longer enough. He craved more. A bigger thrill, a higher risk. The basement poker nights weren't feeding that hunger anymore. One night, Martinez noticed Marcus stopped showing up. He didn't call, didn't answer texts. When asked, Marcus simply said he had found a better game somewhere else. They joked about it, calling him a high roller. They had no idea what that really meant. Marcus had discovered the underground gambling scene. It was a secret world tucked away in the city's darker corners. Illegal games with much higher stakes, players with dangerous reputations, and no police presence beyond those who came to enforce the law with threats and violence. These were places the cops raided, not visited. But Marcus wasn't just visiting. He was gambling, risking everything. The games were run by Tommy the Fish Torino, a loan shark who spoke softly but ruled with an iron fist. He was known for his brutality and his cunning. For years, police had tried to catch Tommy, but he was always one step ahead, never leaving a shred of evidence. His reputation was built on fear, intimidation, and control. In interviews, Tommy described Marcus as cocky when he first arrived. Marcus had thought his badge gave him special privileges. Tommy laughed about it later. "They all think that at first, until they start losing," he said. Detective Rivera knew Tommy's history well. The police had thick files on him, covering a decade of crimes, loan sharking, extortion, violent assaults. But Tommy was elusive. He was like smoke, impossible to grab, and just as deadly. For months, Marcus managed to hold his own at the tables. He won some hands, lost some. But gambling addiction is a cruel master. It doesn't care about wins or losses. The house always wins in the end, and chasing losses is a trap. On the night of March 15th, 2020, everything changed. Marcus sat at the table in the warehouse, sweat forming on his brow despite the cold air. The stakes were higher than ever. The game was intense, every player watching each other closely, waiting for the moment to strike. Marcus pushed all in, heart pounding, hands trembling. When the cards were revealed, the final verdict hit like a hammer. $15,000, lost in a single hand. $15,000 was more than Marcus made in a month, money he didn't have. That night, Marcus called his wife Elena. His voice was shaky as he told her not to wait up, saying work had run late and everything was fine. But inside, his hands shook with panic. He lied to her because he didn't want to worry her, but the truth was crushing him. Tommy's terms were merciless. Marcus owed $15,000, and Tommy made it clear, pay up or face consequences. Tommy explained the terms simply and coldly, 20% interest, weekly payments, and if Marcus failed to pay, Tommy would come for what he was owed in other ways. His house, his car, his family, everything was collateral. Marcus understood. He always understood when the deal was laid out like that. He signed the contract, his signature shaky and barely legible. That moment marked the beginning of a nightmare. Detective Marcus Chen, the respected cop, devoted husband, and community protector, had made a deal with the devil, and the devil always collects his due. When Marcus came home that night, Elena immediately noticed something was wrong. He was jumpy, distant, and avoided her eyes. He claimed he wasn't feeling well. She made him soup and rubbed his back, caring for the man who was slowly unraveling. She had no idea that their perfect life was about to fall apart. The following weeks were a slow and painful descent. Marcus tried to keep his secret hidden, but the strain was obvious. He arrived at work tired and distracted, his sharp focus dulled. The calls from Tommy became more frequent, threats thinly disguised as reminders. Each weekly payment drained their savings, forcing Marcus to borrow elsewhere, sinking deeper into debt. His colleagues noticed the change. The man who had been calm and confident was now irritable and withdrawn. The poker nights that once brought relief became a distant memory as Marcus vanished from their lives. At home, Alana watched helplessly as her husband changed. The man she loved was slipping away, trapped by fear and shame. Marcus was isolated, unable to ask for help, drowning in silence. Tommy's grip tightened with each missed or late payment. His enforcers appeared at Marcus's doorstep, silent and menacing. One night, Marcus found a note slipped under the door. No words, just a simple warning in red ink. Pay up or pay the price. Panic overwhelmed him. He called Elena again, voice breaking as he lied about long meetings and extra work hours. She had no idea their world was crumbling. Back at the station, the other officers waited and worried. They tried to reach Marcus, but he kept declining invitations and disappeared from the poker games they all loved. The Brotherhood felt the first real crack in their bond. Marcus Chen's life wasn't just cracked, it was fracturing. The burden of debt, the threat of violence, the lies to those he loved, it was all too much for the man who had once been their hero. And this was just the beginning. The clock had just passed 2 a.m. at the police station. The hallways were empty and silent except for the faint hum of fluorescent lights flickering overhead. The cold, sterile glow cast sharp shadows on the linoleum floors, giving the entire building a lifeless, haunted feel. Security cameras were mounted high on the walls, their lenses tracking every solitary movement through the maze of corridors. Marcus Chen moved alone through the station, his footsteps echoing softly as he swiped his keycard to unlock the evidence room. The weight of what he was about to do pressed down on him, heavier than the silence that surrounded him. His breath came in shallow bursts and his eyes flicked anxiously over his shoulder, searching for any sign of interruption. It had been 3 weeks since Chen had signed the contract with Tommy, the loan shark whose cold patience was running dangerously thin. In those 3 weeks, his debt had ballooned from a manageable sum into a monstrous $22,000. $22,000 he didn't have. The weekly payments, which Tommy had insisted on without mercy, were impossible to meet on a detective's salary. The crushing pressure of this debt was sinking Chen deeper into despair, threatening to drown him whole. Chen reached the evidence lockers, those metal cabinets that held the secrets of every crime the department had touched. Internal Affairs investigator Brooks would later call this place sacred ground, a repository of truth and justice where every item was meticulously logged, tracked, and accounted for. To tamper with it was to undermine the entire foundation of law enforcement, to shake the pillars of the justice system itself. But Marcus Chen had crossed that line. He knelt before the locker labeled with case number 2000-20047, a drug bust from the previous month. Inside, 2 kilos of pure cocaine rested, their combined street value estimated at $40,000. For Chen, it was a fortune, enough to solve his immediate problem, at least temporarily. His hands trembled as he carefully opened the evidence bag. The white powder inside gleamed under the harsh fluorescent light. He took a deep breath, telling himself it was just this once, just enough to pay Tommy back. Then he'd be done. He'd never cross this line again. But the truth was, lines once crossed have a way of disappearing entirely. They blur, fade, and sometimes vanish altogether. With practiced efficiency born of sleepless nights and endless desperation, Chen removed a portion of the cocaine, resealing the bag to hide any sign of tampering. He adjusted the weight and quantity entries in the evidence log with a steady hand, making sure the paperwork reflected the altered contents. To any auditor or investigator reviewing the files, nothing would seem out of place. It was meticulous, methodical, criminal perfection. The next night, under flickering lights in a dimly lit parking garage at 3 a.m., Chen met with Carlos Mendez, a street dealer who would later speak from the shadows to protect his identity. Carlos recalled that first transaction vividly. A cop approaching him, wanting to sell product. It was an instinctive red flag. His first thought was a setup, a trap. But when he looked at Chen, he saw the fear, the desperation etched on his face. It was real. Carlos handed over $8,000 for the drugs Chen brought him. The cocaine was pure, the best Carlos had seen in months. $8,000 in hand was enough to buy Chen a few more weeks of breathing room. But as Chen drove home that night, the weight of what he'd done struck him like a physical blow. He pulled over at the side of the road and stumbled out of his car. His body convulsed as he vomited violently onto the pavement beneath the dim glow of a street lamp. When he finally made it home, Elena was waiting up. She'd worried after not hearing from him. Chen looked terrible, pale, sweating profusely, eyes glassy and unfocused. He told her it was food poisoning. She didn't question it. She spent the whole night by his side, bringing him water, holding his head, comforting the man she loved, the man who was quietly destroying everything they'd built together. And she had no idea. But $8,000 wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. Tommy's interest rates were crushing, piling on top of each other like an avalanche. Chen's gambling addiction hadn't disappeared with the money. It had only grown worse, feeding on his desperation and pushing him further toward the edge. Then came the phone call that crushed the last of Chen's hope. Tommy's voice was calm but menacing, as he informed Chen he was now in debt for $30,000. $30,000. It was an astronomical sum for a public servant earning a modest detective salary. Chen begged for more time, desperately pleading, but Tommy's answer was cold and final. "Time's up," Tommy said. Then his voice dropped low, almost a whisper, yet every word cut like a knife. "You've got a beautiful family, Chen. A pretty wife. Sweet kids. Would be a real shame if something happened to them while you're at work." Then the line went dead. Chen stared at his phone, the full weight of the threat crashing down on him like a tidal wave. The message was clear. Pay up, or his family would pay the price. No longer was Marcus Chen just a gambler in debt. He was a man whose family's safety hung in the balance. A man who had stepped into a darkness from which there was no easy escape. His partner, Detective Rivera, started noticing the changes. Chen was jumpy, paranoid, always looking over his shoulder, nervous to the point of distraction. When Rivera asked if everything was okay, Chen brushed him off with a forced smile and a tight nod. But the eyes told a different story. Haunted, restless, and full of fear. Rivera would later say he should have pushed harder, should have seen the signs, dug deeper. But Chen had become a master of deception, hiding the truth behind practiced smiles and careful lies. Visits to the evidence room became routine. The thefts grew more frequent, bolder. Each time easier than the last, security footage captured multiple entries. Chen moving silently through the station late at night, keycard in hand, methodically navigating rows of lockers filled with seized drugs and prescription medications. Cocaine, heroin, opioids, anything with street value became fair game. Over the next 2 months, Chen stole drugs worth over $50,000 from the evidence room. Each theft further undermined the cases of the innocent families, relying on the justice system to protect them. When investigators finally audited the evidence room, they uncovered discrepancies in over 30 cases. 30 families robbed of justice because of one man's greed and desperation. But even $50,000 wasn't enough. Tommy had tasted blood in the water and was hungry for more than money now. The phone rang late one night. Chen answered, and the tension in his face deepened immediately. Tommy's voice was cold, clipped. "We need to talk." Tonight, you know where, Marcus Chen, once a decorated police officer, was about to receive an offer that would transform him from thief to accomplice to murder. And in his desperation, Marcus Chen would say yes. Warehouse District, Night Chen's patrol car pulls up to a dimly lit warehouse, one of Tommy's gambling dens. Tonight, no cards, no dice, only a proposition that will change Marcus Chen's life forever. Inside, Tommy waits with two associates. The tension is thick. Tommy says simply, "You owe me 45 grand now, plus interest and penalties." He slides a folder across the table. Inside are blueprints, security schedules, and guard bouts for Morrison Security Services, a warehouse storing high-end electronics. The plan? Get in, grab the merchandise, get out. Tommy needs inside information, and Chen has it. "All you gotta do is make sure the cops look the other way," Tommy says. "Easy money." Chen protests. "I can't help you, Rob. I'm a cop." Tommy leans in, voice low and threatening. "Your daughter Emma walks home from Lincoln Elementary every day at 3:15, right? The same route through Maple Park?" The threat is clear. Help with the robbery or Emma pays the price. Chen's world shatters. The protector becomes a criminal. Chen takes the folder, hands shaking. For 3 days, Chen uses police databases to gather everything Tommy needs: patrol schedules, response times, security detail. Detective Rivera notices Chen acting strange. Secretive calls, late-night printing. When she asks, Chen brushes it off. On the night of the robbery, Chen is 3 blocks away, monitoring police radio. "All quiet in Sector 7, he reports, voice trembling. Inside the warehouse, Tommy's crew moves silently. Alarms disabled, cameras looped. Then Walter Morrison, the 67-year-old security guard, makes his rounds. Walter is 2 weeks from retirement, looking forward to fishing and spending time with his grandchildren. His flashlight catches one of the robbers. "Security!" he calls out. Gunshot. Walter falls. He dies instantly, his life cut short over stolen electronics that were probably insured. Chen's radio crackles. Tommy says there's a problem. The guard is down. Chen whispers, "What have you done?" Tommy's cold answer, "What we had to do." Chen is trapped. The perfect cop is now the perfect criminal. Freeze on Chen's horrified face. No going back. The morning after Walter Morrison's murder, Marcus Chen looked at himself in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. His hands gripped the sink so tightly his knuckles turned white. The weight of what he had done crushed him. Walter Morrison was a good man, a grandfather weeks away from retirement, killed senselessly while doing his job. Chen couldn't stop thinking about Morrison's family. How do you explain to a child that their grandfather isn't coming home because of something you did? But there was no time for guilt. The murder made headlines, and the community demanded justice. In a cruel twist of fate, Marcus Chen was assigned to lead the investigation into the very crime he helped commit. Facing the cameras at a press conference, Chen promised to find those responsible, saying Walter was a man who died protecting others, and that his family deserved answers. But every word he spoke was a lie. Every promise he made was a deception. Behind the scenes, Chen was becoming a master of falsehoods, fabricating leads, manufacturing evidence, and pretending sympathy he didn't feel. Meanwhile, Internal Affairs was closing in. Investigator Brooks had been reviewing irregularities in the evidence room and called Chen in for questioning about missing inventory. When Brooks explained it was a routine check and asked about the missing items, Chen's nervousness was obvious. The way he asked what was missing made Brooks suspicious, and she began watching him more closely. At home, things began to unravel further. Chen's wife Elena discovered a second mortgage on their house for $50,000, taken out without her knowledge. When she confronted Marcus, her confusion and hurt were clear. Chen struggled to explain, unable to meet her eyes. Lies piled up at work and at home, threatening to destroy everything. Chen's partner Rivera noticed his strange, secretive behavior. He was distant, defensive, unwilling to share what was troubling him. She remembered moments when Chen would abruptly walk away from conversations and secretly print documents late at night. But she never suspected how deep the trouble went. Pressure was closing in from all sides. Internal Affairs was investigating, the community demanded answers, his family was hurt by his secrets, and Tommy's gang was still a threat. Chen felt trapped, caught between the law he once served and the criminal world he had entered. Each day, the lines between right and wrong blurred further until they disappeared altogether. At night, Chen thought of his daughter Emma and the life he wanted for her, a life far away from the darkness that now surrounded him. But he felt powerless to protect even her from the consequences of his choices. The perfect cop, the community hero, had become the perfect criminal. Walter Morrison's death marked the point of no return for Marcus Chen. From this moment on, his world would unravel further, and the question remained, could he find redemption, or would he be swallowed by the darkness he helped create?